And there we go. And now we're live
Good.
with the first episode of at least what we will preliminary call. I've taken the liberty of naming it the Symposium podcast. It is you can know me as the Erik, or Erik for short. Uh, I'm a not relevant person that's young and hopeful and very angry about elites and stupid people. And I'm here to learn. I'm to learn from Phil Bucato, a relevant person that knows things and writes Mage books and such. So that's basically the premise here, and we will rant about things on a bi-monthly basis. On a monthly basis. Yep. Woo.
No, thanks for having me on, and thanks for setting this up. I appreciate it. And
Yep.
yeah, I said good morning, and actually that's it's morning over here on the Pacific Northwest, but not anywhere else.
It's 7 in the evening over here, but details. So, yeah, I wanted to do a podcast because I like to talk and I like to broadcast my crazy opinions to the world. And I've always wanted to like have something to do with you because you inspire me. I'm trying to in ways become you. I want to be a sort of relevant writer person for role-playing games and such. It's one of my many ambitions. And we share an equal anger, or almost equal anger, at the world and its stupid inhabitants.
Yeah, I realized that a long time ago. I got into Harlan Ellison in my late teens, and I realized one of the things that drew me to his work is this sense of frustrated idealism. You know, Harlan is this guy who is like, we could be so much better than we are. Why are we being so fucking stupid? And another one of my college favorites from the 80s, Dead Kennedys, with Jello Biafra on the day after Trump's election was announced. Jello Biafra posted a video of himself banging on his wall and throwing himself on his bed, screaming, "How can people be so fucking stupid?" Yeah, I share that. And not just about the Trump thing. I've felt that way since the 80s. I still feel that way.
Yeah, I'm significantly younger than you. I'm born in the year of 1996, and I was there. Well, I was there as a 4-year-old ish, like 5, and I didn't know anything about politics then. My mother is a politician, so she taught me the right way. Sort of. I'm a little bit to the left of her, but I already then, as a 5-year-old who didn't watch the news or anything, I lived in another country. I live in Norway. Hate Donald Trump. I hated him. I hated, not Donald Trump. I mean George Bush. I hated George Bush intensely, so much, and I still to this day have no idea why. Maybe I just sensed his bad policies from afar. Like I like to view myself as akin to like a prophet at times, like when it comes to predicting shit, and maybe even then this was like latent ability showing up. I predicted that this was not going to lead to things, and how right I was.
Yeah.
You know, we got the Great Recession and things. So anyway, just to give potential viewers insight into this program, this is mostly an excuse for us to talk about role-playing games and rant about politics and social-political stuff that annoys us. And the only planned segment I think we have got agreed on so far is to do like a country by country comparison and types to like compare things, just to see what's different, what's better, what's worse in our respective nations, so we can educate each other and the masses. Just so I will bring up something that I think you have knowledge about later in the program, but I wanted to bring up a topic today, and I know that you're passionate about this to an extent, and this also ties to your work, so that's why it's relevant.
Oh, very much so.
I recently learned about the incel movement. I still call it the incel movement because these people are such a level of stupid that I want them targeted. Like I agree with the people like don't call them incels, they're just misogynists. I agree the name is stupid, but I want them named because I want these people to like I'm not saying we should brand them, but maybe we should, and so we could just know where they are. Because I mean, anyone that ever like declares anything like if someone declares sympathies with the incel movement, in my opinion, you're just declared yourself a prospective rapist. Because
thank you.
I mean, that's what the movement advocates. Yeah, it's just
I am posting up a link on my writer page right now. So here we go. But yeah, sorry, go ahead.
So I just wanted, because I have specifically tried to not learn too much about incels, so you could dispense your wisdom to me. Tell the world that may not know about these people. What is the incel movement, Phil? Please tell us.
Well, the basics of it is that it's a bunch of horny guys who are pissed off because they can't get laid, and they're blaming women for that, instead of looking in the mirror and realizing that they're hateful, grotesque human beings who aren't getting the attention they want because it's all focused on them. They are clearly people who don't like women. I mean, you don't post and say things like, I want to rape her to death if you like women. You post those things if you're a grotesque hate bag. And unfortunately, I feel a lot of it comes from a combination of just a sense of entitlement. Well, this movie said I should get the girl. Why am I not getting the girl in real life? Frustration. I mean, obviously frustration, loneliness, and just this idea, this poisonous idea that we are fed, that men are supposed to just conquer and take whatever we want. And if we're not getting what we want, then obviously somebody is keeping us from it, and those people need to be punished. And of course, that's all utter horseshit.
Of course, it's all utter horseshit. And I like that you actually brought up movies, because while these people are entirely, there's no excuse for these people. I do share the idea that this is very much rooted in the essence of our culture, in our folk tales, in our movies, in our songs, in our literature, everything. Because despite the fact that the feminist movement has done a lot in the world, like we have accomplished a lot. The battle is far from over, but a lot has been accomplished. We still have that. We still have that thing where women basically are portrayed as rewards and rewards, prizes, and just objects for property to just be claimed. Oh, you slay the dragon, so now you get the princess.
Yeah,
that.
Yeah, and it's certainly not a new idea, but it's an idea that has become such a trope in popular entertainment that people feel like, what's wrong here? What's wrong underneath all of this is, oh my God, what's wrong with me that these guys can get the girl and I'm not? It can't, what's wrong with me? Well, it can't be wrong with me. It must be wrong with those bitches over there. And it must be wrong with those chads. They call, they call guys who are successful with women, quote unquote, chads. And, and I forget what they call women.
I think it's Stacy, and that's an entire
Stacy. That's it. Yeah. I wanted to say Becky, and it's like, no, that's a different that's a different subculture's different slam on. But anyway, and here's the thing. I get it to a degree. I was I was a lonely kid when I was a teenager. I didn't have my first date till I was like 16. I felt frustrated all the time when I was younger and so forth. And I would look at, especially one of my best friends in college. She just had the worst taste in men. She was always going out with frat guys for whom beating and cheating were pretty much standard operating procedure. And then she'd break up with them, or they'd break up with her, and she'd come to me and like, Mary, you got to have better taste in men. And she's like, oh, but I like them. They're sexy. They're confident and all this stuff. Now, granted, we're both teenagers at this point. We were both 19. And, I was like, well, you could date me. And she's like, you're too nice to date. I'm like, Mary, what do you mean? What is wrong when you think that being too nice is a bad thing? And she's like, yeah, I don't know. But the thing is that to a degree, I get it because I felt frustrated, that my friend was going for these guys who treated her badly. But I didn't stop being. I wasn't being her friend so that I could get in her pants.
No.
I was her friend because I liked her, and I didn't stop being her friend. I didn't get angry at her. I didn't say I'm going to rape you to death or any shit like that.
So what you're saying?
Whatever. We're still friends. I just think you have shitty taste in men.
Yeah, I mean, and let's be honest, who doesn't have bad tastes when they're a teenager? Let's be honest here, and I'm not necessarily talking about romantic taste here. I mean, like just food taste even. But so what you're saying here is that while this girl had poor taste in men at the time, we're not judging her now, but you didn't start hating all women for this, right? You didn't blame them and think that they, because women who are more successful romantically than others should then lose points, so to speak, and be more available. You didn't start thinking that. So you reacted like a reasonable person, is what you're saying. Because incels are a new level of love. They're a new low, okay? I've known about manosphere, but I've specifically tried to ignore it and face them out of my mind because every time I try to read anything they're saying, I literally start ripping, at clawing and ripping at my skin. Because they bring me such pain that I can't handle them. And incels, I have a pathological fear of death, right? I have immense phobia for it. When I heard about incels, for a second, I considered suicide, just for a second, because I was like, no, this has gone too far. Like how people cried when Trump was elected, and they were like, no, we can never go any lower than this, right?
Oh, we prove on a daily basis how much lower we can go.
Yeah,
the thing of it is, and
the United States
I started realizing this. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say the United States is like Vince Russo. It can never disappoint you. Just despite continuously going lower. That's a wrestling reference for people listening. But yeah, continuously just goes lower and lower. It can never disappoint me. I'm lucky, right? I've been very lucky in life, right? From what the advantages I've been born with, I live in a safe, stable, affluent country with free healthcare and free education and stuff, and social programs. I mean, the conservatives are trying to destroy this, mind you. But that's a thing. So I'm in the privileged position where I still think that whole Trump thing is funny, right? If I lived any more centimeters closer to the United States than I did, I would be so horrified that I would be afraid to go outside because yeah, you have this blithering fucking maniac walking around, and he's like a beacon. He's a beacon that just draws the shit that's been growing on the internet. And I trace all of this back to fucking Gamergate. Because Gamergate, this is where all of this really started. All of this rampant public misogyny in the modern day. Now, it's been rampant public misogyny has always existed. I mean, the coverage of feminism in 2018 and 1918 is pretty similar. It's a war on feminism, a war on men, and all of that jazz. But we had a relatively stable period where people shut the fuck up, right? If there were misogynists, they shut up. They were shut up about it, at least semi-publicly about. But ever since Gamergate happened, they just come up. They just come up like fucking cockroaches, just crawling out of the woodwork.
They've got something validating them now.
Yeah, they've got something validating them now. And
for the longest time, behaving like this was something that we were, at least theoretically, we're supposed to feel ashamed about, and now it's validating. Thanks to it's odd because as somebody who's basically I've been part of the internet since 1994, really 93. Uh, I mean the internet, the core of the internet existed before then, but the World Wide Web (WWW) went online in 1991. I started doing Mage in 1993, and that was my introduction to the internet. Was going and working at the White Wolf offices and realizing I knew what the internet was. I'd been reading Wired and Mondo 2000 magazines, and I'd read some early cyberpunk, but I didn't fucking understand it because I didn't have a home computer. This was 1993. Those things were still cost several times my month's rent.
Who
So
had the home computer in 1993? Like, I mean, like for real.
yeah, I mean, very few. A computer in 1993 cost more than a desktop computer. I mean, laptops essentially didn't exist except in
Yeah.
really high-end radio executive models. But a desktop computer in 1993 cost more than a desktop computer costs now in 1993 dollars, which would make it about roughly 3 times what a computer costs now. So obviously, it wasn't something that a lot of people owned if they weren't affluent. And in 1993, I was dead broke. I mean, talk about understanding anger and frustration. A little bit of background. A little bit of background for me. I've been working in the arts one way or the other since 1981. My first my first paying job was painting gaming miniatures for a friend of mine I met in a hobby store in '81. But I've been working professionally or semi-professionally in the arts since 1980, 81. Theater, modeling, radio, music, uh, acting in films, acting in TV shows, and so forth. And I didn't really get started. I did a little bit of writing before 1989, but because I'm dyslexic, I had a hard time writing anything at a professional submission level because it needed so many corrections. Fortunately, some friends of mine in my college got me involved in the computer lab over there. I realized, things like spell check and grammar check, and suddenly I was able to write at a professional level. So I started writing professionally in 1989 as a movie critic and political columnist for some local newspapers at Richmond, Virginia. But at that time, I was incredibly broke. I was married to my first wife at that time. She, for a variety of medical reasons, couldn't work, so I was supporting the two of us. I had 2 jobs, 3 if you count my writing gigs, and all those jobs paid terribly. We lived in a shitty neighborhood, no health care, no coverage of any kind, no savings, no safety net, and I had student loans, which were almost as much as my rent every month. And so I was angry, frustrated. We lived in a high crime neighborhood. You see a lot of the criminal aspects and some of the things that we experienced show up in my work all the time, especially in books like Destiny's Price and the Orphan Survival Guide, where we were damn near homeless. Life was pretty violent back then, and I was violent back then. I had a couple of wake up calls that showed me that I had to either change my life dramatically, or I was going to wind up in jail or dead very soon. So I did to change in terms of changing my life. When Bill Bridges, my old gaming buddy, Bill and I and his brother John, we met in college in 1983, and we were roommates together for a while. When Bill in 1992 got hired by White Wolf and went to go work for them, by that point I had a few professional writing credits, and I said, hey, professional writer over here, and he hired me. I started working for White Wolf in '92. In '93, my wife and I were getting ready to divorce, and I said, "Well, Bill, what you're doing for Werewolf, I want to do for Mage." And Mage at that point was still being written. They hired me as soon as or they sent me a copy of it as soon as it was in editing, and they said, so what do you think? What do you like? What do you not like? What would you do if you were in charge of this? Tell us in the next few days. So I took a few days off from work, read it, wrote wrote like a 24, I think it was, page treatment of what I wanted to do. what I liked, what I wanted to change, and so forth. Interviewed, got the job, started in July, early August. Was hired at the begin. Was hired at the beginning of August in 1993. My wife and I split up, and I moved down to Richmond, rather to Atlanta from Richmond. What all of this means, where all this comes from, is there is a tremendous amount of anger in my work, and particularly in Mage and in Werewolf, and a lot of it comes from that period where I was working two jobs, but we were still broke. Um, I had worked very hard, to get ahead in acting, and that didn't pan out. As a DJ, that didn't really pan out. I'd played in a number of bands, and we would play a few gigs, and then we would break up, and then I'd join another band, and maybe we'd play a few gigs, and then we would break up. So there was.
So that's where the inspiration for Power Chord comes from.
Power chords, exactly.
Yeah, which we will.
Thank you. Oh yeah, sorry.
I will bring up and discuss Power Chords a little later, or dedicate an entire episode to it, because I think it's an interesting game. It's very different, and I want to give it a proper treatment that it deserves. But yeah, as you alluded to it, there's a lot of anger in your work. I see that, and justifiably so. And you giving us your backstory here helps with understanding that anger. But while you still use anger to express yourself artistically, you haven't started any movements to actively smear women or attack minority groups, as far as I know. I'm just trying to be sure here. You've not done that,
right? I missed our connection lost a few of those words. I noticed you said started any movements to what, and then something got blurry.
Okay. I said, despite you having anger in your life due to understandable circumstances, you haven't taken that anger to start anti-minority or women movements or smear LGBT people. No, because you're not a douchebag. So here's the thing: anger is I very much disagree with fiction in a lot of fiction where it's anger is a bad emotion. Anger is bad and horrible and toxic. And no, anger is good. Anger can be used for a lot of constructive stuff, and it serves a very relevant purpose. Because anger is needed. You need to be angry about shit, especially when the elites are coming up without any lube and trying to fuck you and the entire working class. You need anger at those points. That's what you need anger for. But anger should be channeled and expressed properly. And being angry about being lonely. Okay, here's the thing. I'm not the most successful person ever with ladies. Okay. But I've actually gotten laid a few times. Woo! For me. Yay! Basic living. Woo! But despite all this, I've never had any I hate women. It's all their fault. It's not because I'm being awkward and not paying enough attention to my aesthetics or anything. You just fall on their knees and worship me, obviously. Because I'm a man, and women are irrational and lustful creatures. Because this is actually a reference. Because I will present my backstory in a bit. But this is a idea historical reference. Because for the longest period, women were presented contrary to today, actually, because now the misogynists are using the opposite argument in a lot of cases, where they're presented, but men, boys will be boys. They're just more lustful than women. Women are so prudish. But actually, for the longest time, at least in Western, not only philosophy but also theology and just academic and public discourse in general, women were presented as the lustful gender. They're still presented as the emotional one in today's society by stupid people, but that was the thing. So I was making a little reference to that. So I have anger too, but I have a different sort of anger. I have more of an academic anger because this doesn't affect me that much. Now it's affecting me because I'm autistic, so I rely on society a little bit. And when the right wing is now coming and doing microcuts and ruining it for me, slowly but surely making my life worse, that of course pisses me more off. But I've been very lucky. I've been able to sit on the sidelines. So I'm more sidelines angry. But I grew up with my mom, right? At the start, single mom. And she was, you know, a lawyer and a politician, and later she's been other things. She's been tons of shit. So she's a politician for the Labour Party, so she taught me about socialism from an early day. That you have to fight for. You have to fight for the working class. Like we celebrate Labor Day, the International Labor Day. That was a very important day of the year, 1st of May, which, by the way, is now Victory Day in the United States, if I don't remember. Which I found that so funny. Like, what for the rest of the world, a day to celebrate labor movements is now becoming imperialism fixation day over there.
Yeah,
such a great thing.
It helps. You live in you live in a country where socialism actually works.
Well,
and
socialism given. Sorry, socialism, if given an actual opportunity to succeed, tends to succeed.
Yeah. Well, and it's Americans have been fed a narrative that socialism equals communism and communism equals bad. I personally think Marxism is an outdated ideology. So is capitalism.
Yeah.
Neither one of them works in real life.
Yeah, I took a political quiz, and like which party should you vote for? And they were like, you think capitalism should be replaced by a new economic system? And I was like, yes. And you have to be a communist. I'm not a communist. It doesn't work. I'm not necessarily against the concept about of private ownership in general, but I think the problem is that I'm a student of the history of ideas specifically. So I study how concepts evolve from the classical antiquity up to now. And the big problem here is that people and this it's not something you really do much with, but money is becoming money, which is a constructed mode of to do exchanges, is now dominating everyone's mind, because money, you rather than looking at I was going to come with some kind of clever saying here, but the people are just focusing on the wrong thing rather than focusing on living and having happy, decent lives. People are more obsessed with obtaining this currency that's just supposed to be there so people can just conveniently trade, rather than, I don't need rabbit pelts, I already have those. But if you had coal, then that would be like, I don't have coal, I have rabbit pelts. Oh shit, what are we gonna do now? Right. But it's become too much of a focus, and this has been a problem forever, but especially now because people are fed this whole image of everyone should want to be rich. Rich is good. Rich is moral. You worked for being rich and stuff. So it's capitalism is constructing this very toxic view where you should try to take as much as possible, where humanity could, historically speaking, survive because it's a communal species. That's from evolution. So we thrive when we are working communally rather than working egotistically. I'm all about giving people incentives to do shit, but when the focus is an incentive rather than what people should be doing, then that becomes problematic. Especially when some people hoard all the incentive for themselves and don't do anything.
Exactly. Oh, I'm a job creator. That's nice. What jobs are you creating?
It's creating child labor jobs in Malaysia. Yeah, because if you, the Republicans are trying to bring back child labor as we speak.
Oh, well, they have.
Yeah, that's true. They have.
The thing, and a number of Republican officials have been indicted for this. But our vice president these days is one of these people. There was an exception made in after the Civil War. There was the 13th Amendment said you cannot compel work. You cannot compel work and servitude from people without compensation, unless they're in jail.
Yes.
Unless they've been, and that exception has allowed for a whole industry, which has been it's always been there, but it has grown phenomenally.
Now it's in the private sector. That was in the private
Exactly.
sector. That I mean, the U.S. prison complex. Oh my God, we can talk about. Oh,
Yeah,
but
it's horrific.
it's. I mean, how could people even look at this on paper and be like, "This works. This is a good idea, genius." But before we continue with our rant, I wanted to draw something here, draw a line here, because you've talked about your anger, you talked about your past, and you've talked about a little bit referred to your work as a writer for Mage Ascension. Now, what I wanted to ask, like, how much does modern internet cultures like the manosphere and similar movements influence your current writing projects? Like, do they have a presence there?
Oh yeah. One of the things when I put together that prospectus of projects I felt that I wanted to work on back in 1993 when I sent in they asked me what books would you do. One of the first books on there was digital web, because I said this internet thing, which again was completely new at the time, but I said this internet thing it would be huge in terms of a magical world, in terms of a world where you were talking about influencing people's realities. This is going to be huge. So we had done, digital web 2.0. I had when Rich Thomas and I began brainstorming up books for Mage 20th. Digital web 3.0 was on that list. Unfortunately, every time I sat down and started writing it, the internet changed again. And I'm kind of glad that I didn't write it yet, because the internet has changed so much. And the way that the internet changes are, I mean, again, Trump. That both Trump and Sanders are a reaction. And I say this as a Sanders supporter, but those two candidates would not have gotten past the primaries had it not been for the internet.
Well, I would make an argument for Trump because he was actively being propped up by corporate media because he was drawing ratings. Because controversial figure.
Well, he's been a media figure. That's part of the problem.
That's always been his thing.
Go on and on and on about Trump and his collaboration with the media since the 1980s. He's a big outside. I frequently describe him as he's America's id. In the Freudian sense, he is the big, angry, tacky, energetic, charismatic child who says,
the worldview you ask
all my way, and he embodies what a lot of Americans think of as the best qualities of America, and his actual reality is most of America's worst qualities.
And the image that he basically has constructed around himself is actually how most of the world views your nation. I know this.
He's a creation of the American media.
He's a creation of the American media, and that's just big and that good as a businessman, but he's been really good at building a brand.
He's a terrible businessman. Many of his businesses have gone under. If he didn't already inherit money, a phenomenal amount of money, he has actually lost more money than he's made.
I think someone did the math on this. Actually, I think someone did the math on this. If he had just inherited the same amount of money that he did and just not done anything with it and lived his life like grooming donkeys in Peru, he would have more money now than he would have than he has at present.
Exactly.
But what I would say is to just use Mage example. I know a lot of technology in World Darkness games it's frequently associated with stasis, but I would argue that if there's anything that's the most pure expression of dynamism in the world, it's the internet.
I absolutely agree with you. I said this. I said that in pretty much as many words in Mage 20. The idea that technology represents stasis is not something. That's an idea that was there before I got involved.
It
was, and a lot of people, and you. I know you've been part of a number of these discussions. online is it's very strange. As somebody who has been involved with the World of Darkness for over 25 years at this point, it's really strange to be looking at and having these conversations with people acting with people feeling that what we wrote 25 years ago, when we were for all intents and purposes children, is somehow a timeless truth for the ages.
Yeah, I'm very much, I'm a big fan of the World of Darkness, but I very much have the very like, this is a lot in a lot of way. This actually kind of helps with my background because I read a lot of old texts, so I can appreciate what they were in their time. But a lot of this stuff, with the benefit of hindsight and what we know now, was not that well thought out. If we can be honest, I mean, I'm not even going to go into the racial stereotypes and such like that. Unfortunately, came about due to lack of information at the time.
Yeah,
World of Darkness, it's not a timeless classic in a lot of the details, but I think a lot of the core premises are timeless, or not necessarily timeless, but at least really groundbreaking and interesting in role playing games. But I can appreciate reinventing them and fixing a lot of the mistakes, which is why with what you did with the traditions in M20, I think you've for the most part improved upon them.
Thank you. Yeah,
you got the virtual adepts out of 90s pretend hacker culture, for example. That was very nice.
Yeah, well, there's a certain amount, because again, and I've said this a lot of times in previous podcasts and online, I don't own the property. I just kind of keep it up. I'm basically the groundskeeper.
Yep, you're the groundskeeper.
And there are certain things I can change and certain things I can't. And one of the things I can't change because I don't own them is I can't get rid of the traditions. I can say I can revise how the Dream Speakers or the Thanatoics or the Akashian or whatever. I can change how they are defined and how they are perceived to make them make more sense in the 21st century. But I can't just say that didn't happen. Oh, I can say that with a few minor things, but I can't just wholesale change the intellectual property because it doesn't belong to me. It belongs to the company that owns the rights.
Yeah.
So a lot of the challenge for all World of Darkness writers, not just me and not just my crew, has been how to keep something that we were coming up with off the top of our heads as fast as we could write the books back in the early 90s with very little internet. And the only research capability we had was the books that were on the shelf at the library and the books that were on the shelf at your nearest bookstore, and the people that you knew personally who knew about those things. We came up with a lot of really great ideas. We came up with a lot of really terrible ideas.
Yeah.
And what we have tried to do as we've gone forward is to make the great ideas better and make the terrible ideas less terrible.
That's generally
make them make sense whenever we can.
That's generally what you have to do, like in your situation. Like, because you might remember this, but once a long moon ago, I came to you. I beseeched your wisdom, which is what inspired me for the name later for this podcast. But I was like, I want to write role playing games, and your instant advice was, do not get involved with any of the major properties. If you don't own them, it's gonna be horrible. Don't do that. Be independent, be free, and don't expect to make money. That was your advice.
Yeah, that's one of the great things about the current state of role playing games, publishing in general, but role playing games in particular, is that you can now publish as long as you've got the capability, internet capability, and decent computer, and a decent group of people to work with. Anybody can publish whatever they want. You probably won't make money at it, but you can conceivably reach a global audience.
And if you
build
a name, you can get the Patreon.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Patreon, Kickstarter, GoFundMe. The capabilities for crowdfunding exist. It helps when you're doing crowdfunding to have some sort of a name or a reputation or a group of friends or whatever. It helps, but the thing is, you can do it. And one of the things I'm really enjoying about the current state of role-playing games is there are a lot of people putting out a lot of games that couldn't possibly have existed even 10 years ago, much less 20 years ago. And some of those games are great. Some of them are not great. Some of them are, oh my God, you actually thought that was a good idea. But I love that people can do it.
Yeah.
I love that it's possible.
And that doesn't just count for role playing, as you said. That counts for like basically any form of creative expression at this point. I mean, I recently posted, because I found, like, I'm a big fan of history, as I mentioned, and I think all history to an extent is interesting. And I found this like really long, intricate post about the history of fandom and fan fiction and fan art and such. And it was really interesting to see how now that's a thing. That's widespread, as opposed to like you have to hide in the shadows because the lawyer police will come after you and sue you and gaslight you, and then dox you if you wrote /fic, because we can't have them gays involved in our stories. That's the thing. I actually recently found one of my favorite games. Like, actually, my favorite game besides Mage Ascension actually has its second edition out on Kickstarter now. It's called Part-Time Gods. You do really well. It's from a minor studio, and it's already got like 15K, I think, like USD, in like 4 days. I mean, something that's unthinkable, I presume, if you were like in the 90s, if you're like an independent, like tiny RPG studio, and you were trying to, like, I'm going to come out with a new property, or come with the second edition of the property that's obscure. I don't think that.
Okay.
Yeah, what we're going to say now, I was just going to. I was just making a sound as I stopped.
Yeah, it's back in the days when when the only option you had was conventional publishing. The publishing industry, and this is something I've written about both on my blog and on the Mage group. Through conventional publishing, through conventional publishing, the publisher gets between 30 and 50% of the cover price.
Yep.
That's what comes back to the publisher when it's sold through retail outlet. From that 30 to 50% of the cover price, the publisher has to pay for not only the people who worked on the book, the illustrations for the book, the writing for the book, the editing for the book, the layout for the book, and so forth. They also had to pay for advertising and marketing for the book. They had to pay for the office where the book was made, the equipment that the book was made on, the taxes, the utilities on that space. You also had to have, and you still, if you're going to be doing this through the conventional channels, you have to have a warehouse. You have to have an accounting staff. You have to have a warehouse staff. You have to have people who are paid just to box up and unbox the books and send them where they need to go, the product, whatever the product is. You have to have people to take care of the money when it comes in, when it goes out, when your distributor says, when your distributor orders, $5,000 worth of product and they don't send you the $5,000, you've got to have somebody in accounts receivable to bug them until they send you the $5,000. All this stuff costs a phenomenal amount of money. And that's not even counting inventory tax. So people assumed, and still do, people assumed that when they bought a $10 or $20 book, that the publisher got $10 or $20. No, the publisher got about $3.
Yeah, they got $3.
From that $3, they had to pay for things that cost hundreds of thousands of dollars to do. So you needed to constantly have new product. You needed to constantly have product that sold a lot, and you had to have product that sold enough copies to cover the costs of the stuff that didn't. So consequently, a lot of things that would have been really good ideas were just nixed. We're not done because people said, well, this is going to cost us, it's going to cost us $30,000 to do this. That's not even counting printing costs. Don't even get me started on that. But it's like, okay, so producing this book is going to cost us $30,000. Okay, do we think it's going to bring in $30,000 of income at 30 to 50% of the cover price? If not, we can't do the book. White Wolf was successful enough in our early years that we had books that were selling so much that it could cover the cost of the books that didn't. So we were able to be experimental with things like the Book of Nod, or Chronicle of the Black Labyrinth,
or
Children
Changing
of
the
the
Dreaming.
Inquisition. Yeah, and so we were able to throw money at experiments that might or might not pan out. Unfortunately, the gaming market crashed in 1996 due to a variety of factors, including a Wall Street raider being a majority stockholder in Marvel Comics, which ended up driving a third of the comics and gaming stores out of business in 1996 in the United States.
Well, is there anything we cannot blame Wall Street for? Like, is there anything that Wall Street hasn't corrupted?
I'm sorry, I missed part of that. What?
I said, is there anything that Wall Street has not corrupted? Because I mean,
Probably not.
I presume Wall Street wasn't involved with the fall of Rome, but pretty much everything since then been Wall Street's fault. And I wish this was hyperbolic. I wish I was kidding. But if we track down, if you start pulling the threads, it all leads somewhere up.
Yeah, the whole commerce both builds and destroys civilizations. And one of the weird things, one of the cornerstones of the last 300 years, well, really 500 years of human history, is the thing that a lot of people don't stop and think about, is that the Americas, that's both North and South America, the United States, Canada, Mexico, Chile, Brazil, etc., the Americas were founded as a business proposition.
Yeah, of course.
Because of that business proposition, the indigenous Americans were virtually wiped out. Their civilizations were destroyed in order to make way for European business. And in order to make that European business more profitable, a slave trade that had been going both ways between Europe and Africa became a one-way ticket between Africa and the Americas. Everything about the history since 1492, everything about world history has been largely based on the idea of an ever-growing industry based in North and South America, for better and worse. There have been a tremendous amount of technological changes that have benefited humanity as a result. There were new political ideas, like the idea of the freedom of the individual, and that the government should support the freedom of the individual, which is a totally alien idea in 1500.
It's a totally alien idea, and it crops up. But I think that the freedom of the individual as an idea still is very much something that I like to use World of Darkness example again. Like the elite is very much like the worm, like the Hydra entity that is the worm. It just comes with a new head. Like it just adapts. So freedom of the individual. Yeah, this is completely alien. But okay, the whole everyone being serfs isn't working for us person. Individuals, you have rights. We have to protect those rights, and the best way to protect those rights is to give us money. That's very good. Do that. Give us more money and more privileges, and then the individual will be protected, and you will become richer. Brilliant. The ability of the elites to co-opt everything is so astounding. Like, they can corrupt the most innocent thing. Like neoliberals, they're co-opting social leftism. They're taking it. They're trying to rip it out of the real left's cold, not so dead hands. It's just like, it's ours. Yes, we care about women and gay people. Don't care about the fact that we are actively coming with economic policies that destroy the lives of minority groups.
Yeah. Well, we will support your right to exist, but we won't support your ability to exist.
No, because
I'm zero a fan of the Clintons either. The only support that I have ever, the best thing that I could ever say about the Clintons, other than that Bill Clinton helped negotiate the end of hostilities between England and Northern Ireland, and helped end the Bosnian War. The only good thing I can say about the Clintons is at least they weren't as bad as Reagan and the Bushes and Trump, but they were still bloody awful.
And they still built on what they did. Or or help build to what was coming. So I mean, NAFTA.
Yeah. Yep. But yeah, in terms of and one of the challenges of doing something like Mage, which is literally a game about reality wars, has been trying to capture the spirit and the history of real life reality wars in a fictional construct that that was that is only partially created by me and my staff, and that was very much the product of a bunch of suburban American, mostly white kids 25 years ago, writing around the clock so they could get the damn book out by
it's a one group of people
It's very
that know
surreal.
that it's a one group. If there's one group of people that actively know about the lives of others out there, it's suburban white American boys.
Yeah.
That's a thing. That's
Yeah.
they have the best grasp. Tremendous.
Yeah,
they have a
it's something.
huge grasp.
It's something we've been working now that we have. You were asking earlier about the capabilities of the internet, the influence of the internet on Mage. For me, one of the best capability, one of the best things the internet allows. I'll just speak for me because I don't want to speak for other people. But for me personally, the best thing that the internet allows for, as well, in addition to the wealth of information that I can look up, in a matter of minutes, as opposed to, trying to dig up a book somewhere in a library when I don't really have time to go to the library, is that it allows me to, in real time, communicate with people like this conversation right now.
Yeah, you could talk to
a random 20 years ago.
We could do this 40 years ago. No, and if we tried, it would cost us tons of money.
Yeah, 20 years ago, to have this conversation that we're having right now would cost several $100s in a long distance bill, and you wouldn't be able to put it up on the internet in real time like we have it right now.
No.
But with the capability that we have with social media in particular, I can now, and I do this for every project I work on, both White Wolf and otherwise, is I gather a group. I mean, and you know this because you're part of some of them. But I gather together brain trusts of people who I know are not going to dump the rough drafts on the internet, and I bounce this stuff off of the brain trust, and I say, okay, what do you think of this? What works? What doesn't work? Hey, I can go, hey, I need the culturally appropriate name for such and such. Within 5 or 10 minutes, I'll have it. I can, run a phrase in a language I don't understand past people all over the world, and go, is this an accurate translation? And they can go, no, it would actually be spelled and pronounced like this. This is what it translates to. Excellent.
Is Nigeria actually like that? You can ask an actual Nigerian person that lives there.
Right. Exactly. And so as a result, we're able to get a bigger perspective on the world and a bigger perspective on humanity, bring in people from all over the world, or at least bring in people from all over the world to look our work over for oversight. And when possible, if we can find people like Anthony Galatis, who are native Europeans, but who can write at a professional level in English, we can bring in people who can do that. And so we're not restricted to a small pool of suburban white kids like we were 20-25 years ago. And those were the only people we were able to work with.
That's a wonderful. It was a wonderful life for living, isn't it? In that regard.
Yeah. And the thing is, the old school. They think they're the old school fans. I have to ask myself what books they've actually read if they hate this idea. But there are a number of people who had an argument with one. Actually, I think you were part of that argument. An argument with one on my wall just a few days ago, where they go, you're just bringing in these social justice political agendas, and I love your work on Mage, but I hate your politics. I'm like, dude, what Mage books have you written? My politics have always been all over Mage.
This is when people are like Star Trek and Star Wars, bringing in women and those blacks and minorities are just pushing it all on us. It's one female character. That's the main character. Yeah. I mean, Star Wars had I think the first interracial couple in television history.
Star Trek did, yeah.
Yeah, Star Trek. I mean, if it's Star Wars, I mean, my bad. But yeah, Star Trek did. Like here's the thing. A lot of, and I would say I've been saying it after I work. I'm not a fan of Disney Star Wars. Okay, I would just say this because I was a big Star Wars EU fan, and when he died, something broke in me. I can't really enjoy Star Wars, but I still recognize that these movies are better movies than the original movies in a lot of instances.
Oh,
because
much better.
Much better. Like, I'm not talking from an effects standpoint here. I'm discounting that.
No, they're better. They're better written. They're better acted. Back when my wife Sandy and I went to go see when we saw Rogue One, we thought, hey, let's go back and rewatch the original trilogy, which we had both seen many times, but we hadn't watched recently.
Yeah.
The first movie's terrible.
The first movie is terrible.
It's still really entertaining. It's still really entertaining. And I mean, we're talking about we were kids when it came out. We were the ones who went to go see it, 10, 12 times at the theater back in 1977. So it's not like we're some sort of new coming social justice warriors trying to destroy people's childhoods. This was our childhood too. But we went back and we looked at it and we're like, wow, that acting's terrible. Those lines are awful.
Alec Guinness doesn't want to be there.
Yeah, the movie manages to transcend that because there's more good about it than bad. But from a craft standpoint, it doesn't hold up very well. Empire still holds up. Empire is still really good.
Empire still holds up, but I still think I like the Emperor throne room scene from Return of the Jedi, mostly because Ian McDiarmid is wonderful. He's great.
But that's like the only good thing about it. We were like, when we watched Return of the Jedi, we're like, oh my God, when is it over?
Yeah.
This is horrible. I said, and I notoriously loathe the prequel trilogy. I'm like, Revenge of the Sith is better than this. That's terrible.
That's the level of that's the level we're sinking to. But that's the thing. Like, I would say this. Let's say that the original. Let's say Star Wars never existed. Okay, hard to imagine, but bear with me. If Star Wars came out today, with updated effects, like just say that the budget, everything, like they had everything.
To update the effects.
Yeah, but I mean with actual proper updated effects.
I know what you mean, yeah.
Star Wars would get the same treatment as the new movies are getting now. Oh, Luke and Leia, they're merry and Gary Stews, and they're so OP. Like Leia, she's the princess, but she rescues herself. What is she can shoot and fight now? Oh, no flaws. And like in Return of the Jedi, she has the Force now too. Oh, like people's reaction to these new movies is I'm just like, for one, there seems to be like people legitimately thinking there's some kind of socio-political conspiracy. Not social, I would say, not social-political conspiracy to actively marginalize white men by having female and black people in sci-fi movies as main cast members.
Which is bizarre, considering the first two science fiction novels were written by a woman. But and the first continuing action adventure series was written by a black man. The Three Musketeers. Three Musketeers, The Man in the Iron Mask, and 10 years later, Alexandre Dumas was black.
Yeah, but but classics cannot be written by anyone else except white people. That's how it works. Just like conservative Christian white people can't be terrorists by definition. That's how it works.
God, don't even get me started.
They're misunderstood, or lone wolves that need help. They were nerdy, but you were talking about reality wars earlier. I've been working on I was working on a paper, right? And I read perhaps one of the most fitting books I think should be read before reading Mage. The Ascension, or it's a book called The Book of the City of Ladies by an Italian woman named Christine de Pizan from like the high Middle Ages, I think it was. Yeah, high Middle Ages. She wrote this text about women. Basically, she had the luxury of being educated. So she's basically wrote kind of like the Dante's Inferno for women, in the sense that she's putting an author avatar in the book and stuff, and she's talking about I was reading all of these books by these renowned authors, but they're all writing such horrible things about women. women were horrible and sinful and stupid and tried to make everyone's lives worse and so on. And she basically experienced gaslighting before gaslighting as a term existed. She basically describes how her own life experience was basically being squashed and made into nothing by what she was reading, because she, like, these people couldn't be wrong. Obviously, all of these wise men think that. And then she basically has her awakening. But she meets her avatar, which is basically like, I'm using mage terms here because to illustrate, which is basically like basically like the what's this English term for it? But you know the trio in Christianity with Jesus, the Holy Spirit, and God. I don't remember the English term for it off the top of my head. I will just call it the trio. She basically met the female equivalent of the trio, which is Lady Justice, Lady Rectitude, and Lady Reason, and they guided her to see that women are amazing and that there's tons of great women out there. So basically, the entire book goes to her building this allegorical city for women, which is populated by all the wisest and strongest and holiest and coolest women ever, right? And I was just, this is basically like an awakening and a seeking, because she's basically like she's confronted with her own misgivings and beliefs that she's been forced onto her by society. The lie of realities is actively being purged from her mind through debate and discussion with her higher self, so to speak. And I thought that was like, this is reality war. This is Mage. If you've ever read Mage, right? It doesn't have magic in the book, but that's a detail. Like it has the same kind of spiritual journey. And I usually get really pissed off when I read old books, because they usually involve sexism and racism and misogyny and everything that I'm just like, oh. This one was made me really happy, except for at the end. Because at the end, she's like, "Oh, women, by the way, you should tolerate bad husbands, even if they're horrible and abusive, and you should stay chaste, because church censors. So I have to say this: stay chaste and preserve your virginity forever." Like chaste, I know that's the same, but just basically, so basically, this really amazing "you go girl" message, and then she just ruins it at the end.
She probably needed to add that in order to get it published.
Yeah, that's the thing. Like, so it's like one page of like, okay, I know you had to do that. I know you don't mean this.
Yeah, it's like I was saying a little while ago about the capabilities of the capabilities of the internet and the capabilities of modern publishing. You can now, anybody who has something to say, for better and worse, because that's where the incels and so forth come from, but anybody who has something to say has a forum to say it.
Yeah.
And
free speech is very important. I will defend the right of incels to say their stupid shit, despite the fact that I hate it. Because that's free speech. But I will still call them out and say they're horrible douchebags constantly. Yeah. But that's different. That's not going. That's not going against your freedom of speech. I'm not the government. That's you serving. That's you getting consequences for being a douchebag.
Yep. Well, you saw. I think you were involved in that argument on my wall a few days ago with that one person who was, who came onto my wall swinging dick and then got mad when people swung back at him. And I was like, and on an off list, I was like, you came in and started a fight. People punched back. You're not the wrong party here.
You're not the victim.
You came in with an attitude and people gave that attitude back to you. That's not oppression, dude. That's you came in with an attitude and people came back at you with a similar attitude. If that person had said, hey, I can see where you're coming from, but I disagree because of this, there could have been an actual discussion. That's not what happened, and we didn't have an actual discussion. And there's a lot of people who, there's a number of people, that person included, who are now like, you're just oppressing people with different viewpoints. You don't want to hear a different viewpoint. You're in an echo chamber. I'm like, so let me tell you about some of the people I know in real life, and the things that I read in real life, and the ideas that I have.
Would you actively have to track down right-wing stuff for Book of the Fallen? Haven't you actually scrolled through the internet, finding the serious places to know?
Well, it's more to the point. I worked at Barnes and Noble for 6 years, over 6 years, and I was periodicals manager during the Bush administration. I started working in 1999 to 2006. So I was able to read the books, and I was able to read the magazines, and I was able to see, when I say, Ann Coulter says this or Rush Limbaugh says this, it's not because that's not because some left-wing pundit told me they said this. I read them say it.
Yeah.
I read Ann Coulter's books. I read Rush Limbaugh's books.
I've not gotten to the point where I can read Ann Coulter. I give up before it gets Ann, because I think Ann Coulter. Of course you hate it, but I'm just saying, Ann Coulter, to me, Ann Coulter is so obviously just doing this for money. She's just exploiting, because she can. Like, I actually think Bill Maher, before he became a massive sellout, came with this very point. Like, the reason why they keep these people keep going is because they can publish the same book, and the same 500,000 people can read that same book, and they can rake in millions of dollars doing it.
Yeah, well, and the left's got those people too. Don't even get me started on Michael Moore.
I actually I can appreciate Michael Moore sometimes. I don't think he's necessarily that bad.
I did until I read one of his books. And
I've not read his books. I've just read.
I read one of his books, and I'm like, dude, you are exactly in the same boat as Rush Limbaugh and Ann Coulter. You're doing this. You're playing the same game for a different team.
I mean, that's the thing. I'm not going to say that left doesn't have these people, because that's correct. I've not read Michael Moore, sadly, because I've only seen some of the documentaries. But I actually saw this very interesting during the election, where I actually think, because many people didn't take Trump seriously. I thought Clinton was going to win, mind you. I wasn't that astute, but I said from the last day, I wasn't going to say for sure, because I thought it was going to be 50-50-ish. I thought it was going to be close. And the biggest problem with Trump was whenever people said Trump wasn't going to do something, like he's not going to run for president and then run for president. Yeah, but he's not going to get onto a debate. He's not going to win any states. Oh, he won the first states. Well, it's fine. He is not going to be the forerunner. Yeah, but he's not going to win the primary. Trump is not going to win the primary. Well, he's not going to do any well in debates against Clinton. He beats Clinton in the debates. Well, he's not going to win the election. I'm like, but if he did all of those things, despite the fact that you said he couldn't do that, what's stopping him from doing this? This is a serious threat. And Clinton and the fucking neoliberals are not the right people to fight this. Well, when people have Republican light and Republican, they choose Republican because they don't see the difference.
Yeah.
At least the other one is consistent about being Republican rather than just when it's convenient. And that's the thing. And I think he came with a very good point where he was talking about the anger of the working class and the disappearing factory jobs in Michigan, and how she hasn't been here, and how so many of them just want to have a Molotov cocktail they can throw at the establishment that took away their jobs, ruined their children's future, took away their health and money and livelihoods.
Yeah, and the irony, of course, is that Trump is one of the people who did that.
Yeah, but people don't think that's far.
He's like, but I'm standing up for the working man. No, you're not. Your entire business history is screwing the working people.
You've been actually on my Facebook having this discussion with it's a guy from my country that keeps discussing, a guy named Sigurd. I've seen him, but he actually said at one point, Trump is not a traditional Republican, and I'm like,
no, he's not.
He is traditional. He doesn't portray himself as that, but he is. Because policy-wise, look at the people he's put in his cabinet. Like, he says he's populist. He campaigned as a fake populist, but he's still a Republican because massive tax cuts for the rich. Goldman Sachs member. Sorry.
Yeah, the only true populist in that the only true populist in that in that race was Sanders, and he has
Sanders is an international moderate. He's not even left. He's so far. He's like fucking. He's like a fucking Che Guevara militia member compared to in your political spectrum. But in the United States, but he's not really that much of a leftist. Like, he's saying very basic shit, like, to the rest of the world.
Well, again, with that whole part about the Americas being a business proposition. But we should probably talk more about Mage, because people who have tuned into this, assuming that there's anybody listening, people listening to this are probably going, why are they talking about an election 2 years ago?
Yeah, why are we talking about the 2-year-old election?
I want to hear about Mage.
We want to hear about
does tie together.
It all does tie together. We try. I said we both try to pull this in, see where this is relevant to Mage, and connect the dots a bit. I'm not making a secret of it. If there was one World of Darkness game I could be involved with, it would be Mage, because Mage is I think, like, there's also, I call them White Wolf-isms or Old World-isms with World of Darkness, but I think the Mage is the one with the fewest of those, or the one you can overcome the most. Like I think Vampires is doomed. Personally, I'm not a big fan of VTM. I like it, but it's not meant for me, because I sympathize with the Roman emperors who deify themselves. So when vampires are like, "Woe is me, I'm a monster," I can't sympathize with that. I'm like, okay, I get why you think that, but I don't know. Praise Cain, embrace vampirism or weirdness. So that's why I like Mage and Changelings, because they embrace how crazy they are and the stuff they do. But if I'm correct, you've recently finished the first draft of Gods and Monsters, isn't that correct? M20 Gods and Monsters.
It's past first draft. It's in editing.
It's in editing now. Yes.
It went to editing last week.
I was sure that was what I was
saying. It took it was a hard process on a variety of levels. When I first came up with the project, when I first envisioned it, I just figured I'd write a bunch of characters. And
are there any gods in the book? I'm going to ask. Maybe this is a spoiler, but are there gods in the book?
There are gods in the book. Yep. And in fact, this ties in with one of the reasons it wound up being a much more challenging book than I expected, was because initially, like I said, I figured I would just write up a bunch of characters. And then as the conversation has been developing over the last few years, because I came up with the idea 4 years ago, I realized it's not my place, really, culturally, ethnically, accurately, it's not my place to write about other people's cultures. If I have the opportunity to hire other people from those cultures. So what I ended up doing was I ended up making more connections with people. And James James H. Sobrano, I believe is the name he's going by now. James and I have been friends for years, but James, in between the time that I came up with the idea of Gods and Monsters and the time I actually started writing it, James started writing professionally. My friend Hiromi Kota, Hiromi and I have been friends for almost 10 years. He just started writing professionally, and actually I think his first professional publication is in Gods and Monsters. Isabella Price, who I met not last year but the year before at Crypticon, is an actual, from Louisiana, an actual practitioner of voodoo. And I said, I want to hire y'all to write some of this stuff, because you would write it better and more accurately than I would.
I actually have noticed stuff like that in Onyx Path's approaches, trying to do, and this is ironically, despite not being like, again, this is going to be related to what I think Gods and Monsters are going to be about to an extent. I was reading this Dark Ages 320 book that came out, which is a companion book. It was a companion book, which essentially was just a book with various domains. But what the cool thing was with all of these like regional domains is that basically they had like a regional supernatural for each domain, not like just, oh, this is a bloodline or a ghoul family or whatever. It was an actual like supernatural based on real stories and cultural ideas from that place. So like there was actually one for Ireland that's in right next to the one where my hometown is in Norway, actually, which is really funny, really small obscure island. Where it's in that chapter was a Norwegian supernatural type, and another one that was like a Byzantine one and stuff, which I thought was cool. And based on what you're saying here, that we're saying maybe something semi-similar to this in Gods and Monsters, where we're seeing the wider world of World Darkness through the lens of Mage, but we're seeing other things there bumping in the night.
That's exactly what I wanted to put in there, and that's exactly what we put in there. And it took some doing, partly because suddenly I was working with a lot more writers than I expected, partly because like I don't name names, but some of those people are still they're new. And I I had it's a steep learning curve between writing on the internet and writing for publication, and I worked with some of those people through the steep writing the steep learning curve. Also ended up bringing in some other people, and then there were the cultural and political things that happened, with the Trump Ascension, as I call it, and suddenly when you have James was at Standing Rock. He spent several weeks at Standing Rock, and he came back very understandably angry and depressed.
Is Standing Rock
go ahead.
I was going to ask if Standing Rock is coming up in any of the Mage books, because I call Standing Rock the event that convinced it will. Excellent.
It is now.
It is now. What I was going to say is that Standing Rock was the event that convinced me that Pentex is real. Yeah. I'm convinced Pentex exists. Maybe not with that name, but Pentex, the entity. There is some kind of Pentex entity out there. It's behind all of this. I'm convinced now. Like
the thing, Bill and I knew this back in the 90s. I mean, and the other people, Ethan and so forth, with Pentex subsidiaries. That's only minor exaggeration. When we did Technocracy Syndicate, we actually had to tone it down how bad the American business climate really is for Technocracy Syndicate, because otherwise it would be depressing.
Speaking of which, speaking of syndicates, because they're perhaps the most controversial of the conventions. I don't know if you were involved, because I've not done. I've not done too much research, mostly because the places I've tried to do research before doing this, like on you, has been very inaccurate. The White Wolf Wiki is not that good about telling about your more recent projects, sadly. But what I'm going to ask is that in the 2013, I think, a bunch of new convention books showed up, because Iteration X was the only one that got a revised convention book. Were you involved with any of them? I thought the Syndicate one was really good.
No, those were done in sort of an interregnum period. Basically, White Wolf was bought by CCP in I want to say 2006.
Yeah.
And so CCP continued to publish the White Wolf books. By that point, the Old World of Darkness, the Old World of Darkness had been finished, but they were still at the point where the Old World of Darkness was ended, which I believe was 2003, might have been 2004. By the point where 2002, excuse me, 2002, the point where the Old World of Darkness was ended, there were still several convention books that were unpublished.
Yep.
When CCP bought White Wolf, they were doing the New World of Darkness, now called Chronicles of Darkness. In 2011,
I think it started in 2012.
It was 2011, CCP closed its publishing division, at which point Rich Thomas, who was one of the original founders of White Wolf in the first place, and has been involved with White Wolf since White Wolf magazine in the late 80s, Rich Thomas said, hey, can I license this property and finish these books that were in progress when we stopped? And he cut a deal with them. They crowdfunded. We know where things went from there. That's on its path. The thing is, in between, there were those 3 convention books, and Ryan Macklin was hired as the developer to finish those. Those were books that were conceptually kind of in progress when I got started on Mage 20. Several of them, two of them had already been written. The third was being written while I was writing Mage 20. I was not involved with them. I like what they did, and I incorporated what they did into Mage 20, but I wasn't involved in doing them myself.
I think they helped humanize the modern Union, because I still think the Order of Reason is still my favorite Mage faction, like the greater Mage faction. The Order of Reason is my favorite World of Darkness source book. I think that was great. I know you were involved with the Order of Reason. Great. I love it to the point. I actually want to play like a modern day Order of Reason character. It's just that he's like using like mundane text, so it's not like using sci-fi stuff or like reality hacking or like hyper modern stuff, but more like he's more basically kind of like a Renaissance man without not using the term correctly, but essentially that was the idea. I want to do that as an homage, because that sounds better than that blatantly stealing the idea. I thought the book's great, but the Technocratic Union was very Orwellian, and it still is, but very, especially like at the start, it was very like they are the bad guys, or they're horrible, and they want reality to be static and bad.
Yeah, I never liked the whole big bad evil technocracy. It was something obviously I inherited and then I changed it. It's funny you mentioned Sorcerer's Crusade, because like I was saying a little while ago with the brain trust, using social media and getting people from around the world to check my work as we were doing the books. Mage the Sorcerer's Crusade was the first book where I was able to do that. That was, we didn't have social media as it exists now. Facebook, MySpace, and so forth were still years in the future. But by that point, I had enough contacts with people.
AOL existed at least.
And that I was able to put together a brain trust. We weren't able to get together, like we do now, with Google Hangouts and so forth to talk about things. But I was able to I had my friend Oliver Hoffman in Germany. I had another friend in France who I'm unfortunately forgetting because it's been 20 years. But in any case, for Sorcerer's Crusade, for the first time, I was able to bounce ideas off of and get ideas from people who were actually in Europe, actually from Asia, actually from the Middle East, and make sure that the stuff was accurate. And the idea worked so well that I've done it on almost every project since then. With Deliria, Fairy Tales for New Millennium, which I started working on in 2001.
A game I've wanted to read for the longest time.
Well, that's such a long story. I'm not even going to get into it right now.
There's another episode. There's another day.
That's another episode. I'm going to do a whole episode just on that.
Let's trust me. There are tons of episodes that's coming. I've not brought up Jordan Peterson yet for that very reason.
But with Sorcerers, with Deliria, I got together a group of people who I had met at the bookstore. I was working at a media play, which was a now extinct superstore. I talked to a couple of people I met there. I said, "Would you like to be part of the brain trust for this thing I'm putting together?" Because they were White Wolf fans, and I said, I want to know, what do you like? What do you not like? What are you sick of seeing? What do you really want to see? And then we started brainstorming from there, so that Deliria would be both familiar but different from what I had been doing. One of the reasons I left the World of Darkness in the late 90s was because I just got burned out. I got tired of doing the same thing over and over again. I wanted to do something that was different, but that was still familiar enough, A, to have market value, and B, that it was still me, A very good thing about White Wolf, both then and now, is that within the boundaries of an intellectual property that I don't own, I've been given, and people working with me have been given, a lot of creative freedom. So consequently, Mage is very, very me, and I needed to figure out something a way to create something, it was very, very me that wasn't Mage. And so for that, I worked with the Brain Trust, what I called the Silver Circle for Deliria, and again, it worked so well that I've used that approach ever since.
Yeah, I maybe have told you about this before, but ever since you told me, doesn't get involved. Don't try to reach the Onyx path, and that's one of the reasons I haven't applied to any writing companies. Second one being that I'm such like I'm such not a perfectionist. That's not the right word, but I'm such a I'm my own worst critic. So whenever I write something, I'm like, this could never pass any kind of like roll call or anything. Like this will not get me in anywhere, and I just scratch everything out. But I have had this idea. I tried to do what you've been doing. I tried to find an idea that's you, that's a game that's me, and I had this idea, which is kind of inspired, a bit inspired by Mage. We'll say this, but which is basically like an urban fantasy game, but we're basically all the magic and magical and fantastical in the world stems from humanity's history. So basically, there's this like big realm. I call it the mythical past because there's a very interesting dichotomy between myth and history and how often they mix together. Myths become recognized history, for example. I'm not even talking myths that necessarily as in the Greek like hero myths, but I'm talking like myths like I don't remember the guy's name off the top of my head because American history is not my strong suit. Like I like modern history, but like not like early modern. So like the British are coming. I don't remember the guy who did that. That didn't actually happen.
Okay, most Americans don't know American history either.
Yeah, but I don't remember the guy's name. But a guy who rode through, like, supposedly rode and yelled, "The British are coming! The British are coming!" That's not how that works. No, it was it was a stealth operation for one. His message was delivered.
That was, but it wasn't like I mean. Paul Revere was one of I think 4 or 5 writers, and he wasn't even the one who did the most writing. It's just he's the guy he was a silversmith, so he had money, and because he was a silversmith and he had money, and because he had status, and because he had status, people talked about him, not about the other people who did it. Dr. Prescott and a few other people, I think even.
I mean, there are tons of myths there, American myths, like how John Smith, the great sound John Smith, great man.
Yeah, all of that stuff was bullshit.
Yeah, and so on and so on. Like, and I wanted to reflect that. How basically like where this would be like this magical realm where both real history and myth would be like intermingled, and so that it's a growing concept. But that's what I've been working on it now that I'm done with most of my exams. I've been poring over my tomes or PDFs rather, and I've been pondering it and writing. Problem is that whenever I try to come up with I'm stuck on the dice system because whenever I try to come up with a dice system, someone else has already come up with it. I'm like shit every time.
Yeah, that happens. The nice thing,
D10s. That's I tried to find a nice D10 system because that's what I'm used to. I'm like, God, that is because I don't like math. I'm not a math person, so I don't want to have more rules than strictly necessary. Without like I don't want to play. I don't play Pathfinder for a reason. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, I personally prefer lighter rule systems. Says the guy who has in the current iteration of Mage has published almost 400,000 words of rules, but I prefer personally a really simple. I like the Powered by Apocalypse system. It's limited in what you can do with it, but in terms of specifics, but it's really, really wide open in terms of what you can do with it dramatically. One of the things I've really liked about role-playing games that have been coming out recently is the very stripped down character and story oriented systems, as opposed to the very heavy tactical dice charts simulation systems.
Well, I think those are winning out for a reason, because to me, role playing is all about story. like I made a post about this on Facebook recently, where to me a bad role isn't a bad role. To me, a bad role is a good role. Failure and success are equal, in my opinion. The story is all that matters. So if I do something and this ends up diverting the entire story, and the group are like, "Oh, we're now in trouble," I don't care, because that could still be a very interesting story. So
it's the audio. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, that was I just made. As I said, I sometimes make sounds when I'm gonna stop. Funnily enough. Yeah.
Well, it's one of the changes, and again, this is one of those technology things. But one of the changes in role-playing games, in terms of the market and the medium, is that the strategic simulation element of role-playing games, which obviously role-playing games came out of taking military units and giving them names. But and then role playing out, my swordsman says such and such. But role playing games now, because strategic simulations are covered by computer games now and board games, there's not, therefore the people who want to act out who want to still do paper based or live action role playing are people who want to act out stories and characters, not people who want to simulate how many orcs you can kill in a round. You can do that on World of Warcraft a whole hell of a lot easier and cheaper than you can in tabletop role playing. So the emphasis on tabletop role playing has changed and is oriented more and more and more towards simple systems and simple systems that are character and story driven. Granted, there are still people who like to play old school, but there are systems for those people as well. Why anybody would want to play Rolemaster, I have no idea, but some people like it, and Rolemaster has been, Rolemaster has its fans and adherents too. And with the medium where it currently is, everybody can get what they want. I like that. I like that a lot.
Yeah, and that's why I like it. The older I go on, the more time I've put into role playing games, the more I've grown detached from, for example, video games, because the freedom and the to do and experience what I want in role playing games is because it's so unlimited. I find that other pieces of fiction have a hard time replicating that experience, which is why I'm one of those people, like a lot of people, like very much like Mage Ascension should get a video game adaptation. And every time someone says that, I'm like, no. I like the idea where you're coming from, but I don't think this will work. I don't think that you can. That if we are in like the year through 2030, and the technology has advanced to the point where you could like basically do sphere magic in virtual reality or something, maybe. But there's no like we talked about writing adventure models for Mage at one point, and how impossible of a task that is.
Yeah.
Imagine trying to code a video game doing it.
Like a video or computer game adaptation would be possible. It would just be a different game. But
it wouldn't be Mage. That's my point. Like if
you could use the intellectual property of Mage and incorporate some of the ideas in Mage. The presentation would be very different.
Yeah, the presentation.
I have ideas for all of those things. Whether or not I'll actually be involved in doing them is an entirely different story. But there are ways to do it, but it would be different. It's just like when people complain about the TV or movie adaptations of comics. Oh well, but this is this way in this comic, and they changed it in the movie. That's because movies, TV shows, and comics are three totally different media with a totally different way of telling the story. It's the same thing with computer games and
role playing games. I'm going to comment an unpopular opinion here. I think that, especially in the case of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, that it's largely improved on the source material.
Oh, I totally agree.
Because here's the thing. You've seen Infinity War, right? The newest Avengers movie. The newest Avengers movie. Yeah, you've seen it. I've seen it. Any viewers that are on, I will now say some spoilerish things. In the storyline that Infinity War is based on, like this movie, I have to say the motivation for everything is so stupid. Okay, like Thanos his entire motivation is, I want to kill half the universe to impress death because I'm in love with her. She's a woman. I'm like, what the fuck is this? Like, who thinks like that? And people like Thanos. Thanos, this great villain, this great mastermind is doing it because he wants to impress a girl. So he kills uncountable trillions of people because he wants to impress a woman. Or like, so I'm not saying because it's impressing a woman. Like, if he was a girl and he was impressing a man, it would be just as stupid. Like, I'm just like, no, comics, go away. And the comics have two problems. One, comics are stupid, okay? And I mean, there's a level of stupidity that I can accept, okay? That's fine. I mean, like to use another movie example, Captain America. What was I going to say? I have to use an example. Captain America: Civil War. Okay, a lot of the premise in that movie was kind of stupid, but we could roll with it because it was a cool movie. A lot of the comic problem with the comics is that they keep building on it, so it keeps getting stupider and stupider and stupider, and just builds up, and it keeps getting more convoluted to the point you can't follow anything. That's why all superhero adaptations are basically restarted versions of the comics, because you couldn't possibly take anything current and be like, okay, we're going to start this as a starting point. And like, okay, Spider-Man has been like the symbiote like 4 times. At one point, he thought he wasn't real, and he had a clone that was actually real, but it turned out he wasn't real. And now he died and switched body with someone else in another dimension. And then he was a leader of like a group of Spider-Men from across the multiverse. And then right, it keeps going on. Right, you can't work with this. So like the Marvel, like that's why you take individual stories out of the context and you adapt them and make them stupid. And Infinity War was a brilliant example of that. I think Infinity War took a cool but stupid story and made it cool and less stupid.
Yeah, well, look at Black Panther.
Black Panther was an amazing movie. Killmonger.
If you go back to the original comic source from the Killmonger storyline in Panther's Rage, from the 1970s. There are bits and pieces of that in the movie, but it's a 1970s comic written by a white dude. Granted, the artist for part of that run was black, but the story was written by a white dude through the lens of a 1970s white dude with no access to cultural accuracy, other than maybe what he might have looked up in the library, written under a tight deadline for a disposable medium. So it's, on one hand, there were brilliant ideas on there. On the other hand, it was really fucking stupid. What they did with the movie was brilliant. They took all the best elements from the Panther's Rage storyline and from, why am I blanking on his name? I am Christopher Priest, who is a Black American author. Christopher Priest took the Panther's Rage idea, refined it through the eyes of a Black American author who was actually able, in the 1990s and early 2000s, to do cultural and historical research as well. And those comics are substantially better, but they're still comics, and they were still tied to the limitations of comics. And what they did with what the filmmakers did with the Black Panther movie was took the best elements of the Panther's Rage storyline, the best elements of Christopher Priest's run on the book, amped them up, put them through the lens of the 21st century, and came up with one of the best superhero movies imaginable. It's still a fucking superhero movie, and it's got really stupid limitations because of the trope of what a superhero, what superheroes are. But under those limitations, they were able to do amazing things with them.
I think so. I think Black Panther is one of the best movies of this decade, personally.
Yeah.
I think
absolutely. It's stunning how good. It's stunning how good it is.
And it came so out of nowhere. Like from a financial standpoint, like I thought the movie was going to be good, right? But I had no idea. Like, this is actually the most successful single superhero movie in history.
one of the most successful movies, period, in history.
Yeah, it's one of the most successful movies, period. But it's also it's the most successful superhero movie with a single superhero in it ever.
Yeah,
And
it is. Oh, good.
And it breaks all the conventions, right? It's centered on people of color. Women of color are part of the main cast that steal the show, in my opinion. Like it's all centered on African American issues. It's all about trying to present at least a respectful view of like yay Africa. And so it's like breaking all the rules. It's not, where is the imperial white man coming to civilize these people? That's the like where is he in all of this? Nowhere, because he sucks. Go away, Quatermain. So I love that movie. But we also had a conversation regarding magic at one point, because you, as you write Mage, you actually, for the most part, haven't liked mages in role-playing games and fiction. Like, you've never been like too much of a fan, after what you've told me. But Mage actually felt like magic. And I want to ask you something. Did the Doctor Strange fight against Thanos, like that short duel, did that feel like magic to you?
Well, the idea, one of the things I love about Mage, and this was Stuart Wick, the original creator of Mage. The huge difference, I never liked playing wizard characters in role-playing games because they didn't come across like magic. I have been interested in and involved in paranormal and metaphysical subcultures and so forth since the 80s. Since my teens, I've always had an interest in religion and an interest in magic and so forth. And so the D&D spellcasters and so forth, that didn't feel like magic to me. When I read Mage the Ascension, the editing draft that I got back in '93, I was like, this is the first time I've seen somebody present magic as an extension of the person who uses it, not as a bunch of combat maneuvers. And that was a phenomenal change that I've made a point with me and my collaborators and the other people who have been developers on the line, Bill and Brian and Jess. We have made a point of keeping that idea of magic as an extension of the person who uses magic, rather than magic as some sort of thing that you use to do with it, to do something to kill enemies or whatever,
or do a specific thing. I agree. I'm going to use a bit a very misquoted Star Wars quote, where basically it was from the perspective of Sith, where it was the Force, like lightning and telekinesis, those are mere conjurers' tricks compared to greater potential. Like shooting lightning, it's neat, but that's nothing compared to the actual things you can do with it. When you have reality bending powers, when you can do shit beyond compare, throwing fireballs is relatively cute. And it's such a minor aspect of everything. Like I'm just talking about the Force sphere alone, with all the stuff you can do with that. Like I shoot lights at you. Shoo is such a minor thing, and that's I think it's well part of what comes across with Babe. Like a big problem with me and a lot of wizards or magic characters in fiction and in role-playing games is that I think magic should be like with real skills, you should be able to improvise with magic. Like it shouldn't be like, I can only cast my firebolt spell and my sense book pages spell. I can't combine this in any way. Oh shit! So I'm confronted with something new. Like the cool thing, as the cool thing about Mage, like if you're confronted with something new, you can probably use your spheres to come up with an improvised solution of some kind. Just that if you were stranded on a deserted island, you could use your skills, whatever they are, to help you out there, most likely, and improvise something. I think magic should be the same way. Where it, as you so neatly put it, it's an extension of the user. And that's what I think Mage the Ascension does well.
Yeah, it can be a real pain to try and run it, as a storyteller, which is why, particularly in 20th anniversary and the 20th anniversary quick start rather, I put the charts of common magical effect. If you want to do this, use this sphere plus this sphere at this level, because that does make running the game a whole hell of a lot easier than trying to memorize all the various different possibilities of what you can do at what level of what sphere. But I love the ability. I love the flexibility of Mage, even though I recognize that from both a storyteller perspective and from a game designer perspective, it can be a monumental headache. I love the flexibility and the things that it allows you to do. Also, it was really important to me and remains really important to me to be able to reflect the vast range of real life magical practices without saying this game, magic works this way. Magic works according to the 14th century hermetic style. No, magic should be able to fit into any practitioner. Magic and Mage should be able to fit into any practitioner's style. That's where focus, the idea of paradigm, paradigm practice and instruments, is used as a lens to represent how a person does magic. But in terms of the game capability, you can theoretically replicate any form of magic with the spheres. Without saying
you can do ancient Egyptian magic, you can do hyper science, you can do like, to use another comic example, you can do League of Assassins Batman stuff with the Kissifari if you want to do Social Crusade and stuff like that. You can go from the completely like high fantasy blocking a moon laser with your hand stuff to like I'm using like arrows that I have had a special alloy on so they do more damage, or I've like mixed a certain compound in it that makes it explode with light when I shoot at the people. But and I think that's too cool. That's basically the idea for my basically my idea for the next main character. Advanced martial arts and then basic like in old timey tech, like the urban primitive technomancer essentially. Keeps it simple. Thinks his fellow Aetherites are crazy. Like, well, then again, I think all Aetherites think all other Aetherites are crazy. Society of Aether, my favorite tradition. They're all about doing things for science. Like I actually went around asking people I tried to ask people a deep ethical question the other day. Like, if you could make a god, like you couldn't turn yourself into one, but you could just make a god. You couldn't control anything about this, but you would make a god that would actively interact with Earth and its citizens. And we're talking like Greco-Roman style god, not stupid monotheistic boring god. Would you do it?
Yeah, well,
I'm the kind of person who is like, I would press the button. I would make whatever come may be. I would press it, and I would press the can you make a Hydra button? Yes, I would make a Hydra for science.
I think I missed part of the question. I'm sorry.
I've basically been asking people a question. If you had the ability, let's say you have a button in front of you, and you said, okay, if you press this button, you cannot control anything about this, but a deity will appear, like be real on Earth with powers, like a Greco-Roman style new deity. If you press this button, it will happen. Would you press the button? I would press the button 10 times in very quick order. Because and then if I was given a button, if you do this, you can make monsters. Yes. Be present. And if you do this, like AIs, sure. I'm like my favorite mage character ever. I had a mage. His name was Li Cheng. He was he was a Chinese American. He and an Ephraite, and he made monsters in his lab. And he got really inspired by Lord of the Rings when he saw the flesh cocoons that the orcs were grown in. So he was like, maybe that's why my creatures are going so crazy, because metal pods are not good. I will do flesh cocoons now. So he grew a giant war bat from his flesh cocoon that he was riding on, and he put a very nice pink bow on it. It was wonderful.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone thought it was crazy, and it was like, it's science. Is what it is. I'm creating life, glorious life. And they especially got very worried when they started talking about, I'm going to make that bat thing, give it a mind, and then I'm going to make it sort of weird, like sharing an avatar so it can do magic. And people got really worried, and then they killed me.
Mm-hmm.
I also coincidentally got killed because a fox, a marauder that thought it was a kitsune, was very mean and it melted a lot of people around me. So my character responded very rationally by making a 50 successes life virus to attack, to kill foxes.
Cool.
I rolled really well on the ritual roll.
Mm-hmm.
It basically the story was like a 50 successes one. Wouldn't that exterminate all foxes on the planet? Or like, maybe. I mean, who cares? I mean, it's for science. And then I was put down. That's very sad.
Mm-hmm. Cool.
Then again, that I've also been selling hydras to the Sabbat didn't help.
Mm-hmm.
Because I mean, obviously, you have to do that. If you could sell hydras to people, I think you should. If you can't sell hydras in America, haven't we lost our freedoms? So,
I'm not sure.
No, I'm not. I'm giving the 1%ers ideas now. They're going to get hydras ready to when they're going to exterminate the minorities and the working class. That's when they're doing. That's when they're doing hydras.
Oh yeah, a bunch of them would. Yep, a bunch of them totally would.
I'm giving them ideas now. Shit, if you're a 1%er, don't listen to this podcast.
Don't listen to this podcast. Yeah. No, I'm sure plenty. I'm sure there will be a number of people who are already like, oh my God, he's tying Mage and politics together. I'm so offended.
We scared those people off an hour ago. Then they're gone at this point. We spooked them away very intentionally, mind you.
On that note, I need to wrap up.
I think this is a very natural point to wrap up, and we will see each other another time and have another episode. It will be great, and we will talk about other relevant Mage and social, political, and role playing stuff. So this has been our first episode, and hopefully we will see each other soon.
Yes. I look forward to talking with you again soon and chatting more online as well. Thank you so much. I really appreciate you setting this up.
Yeah.
And I enjoying talking with you and all that. I'm just like I looked at the clock and said, oh my God, I've got at least 2,500 words I need to write in the next 4 hours.
Yeah. Good luck with that, because you're going to need it.
Thank you.
See you around. I look forward to see you writing. Bye.
Okay, thank you. I'll talk to you later. Take care.
Thank you to our listeners. Bye.